Even more telling, I was a radarman aboard the USS Constellation during Vietnam, and we saw UFOs. I mean, solid, tangible contacts. And again, by solid, tangible, when what we saw on the radar screen, they weren't, you could exclude hallucinations, reflections from Mars or Venus, all the drug use, all that stuff. And it wasn't that, it wasn't what we called sea return or garbage. It was solid. And you had ways to manipulate that viewfinder to bring it in a more solid way. But anyway, here's the thing. We would have these logbooks, and they would have us write down the UFOs and the range and bearing. And they were numerous. There were many of us, probably all of us saw UFOs. But we were told, and keep in mind, most of us guys in the Navy at the time were under the age of 20. We were like little babies, playing the war games. Under the age of 20, they told us, keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anybody what you saw. And during my off hours, what I would do is I would go there when I was, at the CIC, the Combat Information Center, and all the movies you'll see, the status boards and all that. And I would look through these logbooks and look at all the UFO sightings, and there were tons of them. So the next day, when I was off ship, there would be brand new logbooks, and they would start all over.
Welcome. I'm here with Maxim Furek. Maxim, welcome.
Sean, thanks so much for having me on the show, and I'm glad we got this thing started. So, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sometimes it's always an adventure working with Riverside.
Yeah.
But thank you for working through it. So,
for sure, yeah.
How did you get into Coal Region Hoodoo? Like, what made you want to write a book about that topic? First of all, start wherever you want to start, but that seems like first of all, it seems fascinating, but what exactly do you mean by Coal Region Hoodoo, and then why did you get involved?
Yeah, well, first of all, Coal Region Hoodoo, it's really one of my better-selling books, and it's sort of like two books in one. It's a really thick book, but it's called Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit. And being from northeastern Pennsylvania and being familiar with a lot of the superstitions and the lore that's up there, especially in the coal regions, I mean, there's so many things happening. I was a little bit upset. I was frustrated that the majority of the books written about Pennsylvania paranormal are typically about Lancaster, where they talk about the white witches and the hex signs and all that, or they're about Gettysburg and the lost ghost, the confused ghost and all the people that have died in Gettysburg. So that's pretty much where all the emphasis has been. And I thought my area, just has just as much of a story to tell, or possibly even more. And so I started to put together a collection of things that attracted me, that fascinated me about not only northeastern Pennsylvania, such as Sheppton, Centralia, Richard Sharp Shaver. I mean, there's so many other things that happened there. And also western Pennsylvania, specifically Chestnut Ridge, which is a 100-area stretch from Pittsburgh down to West Virginia, where they see the most amount of UFO or Bigfoot sightings in combination with UFOs and orbs. And just for the record, Pennsylvania allegedly is number 3 as far as Bigfoot sightings after California and Washington states. And then we have Pennsylvania. I think a majority of the sightings are in western Pennsylvania. We're fortunate because we have tons of Sasquatch seekers. We have people like Eric Altman, who is in charge of the Bigfoot organization there, and also a guy named Stan Gordon. And Stan's a friend of mine, but Stan Gordon is the guy. He's sort of like the keeper of the key, keeper of the flame. And whenever the state police, the Pennsylvania State Police, get a report about an orb, a UAP, or a cryptid, they'll tell the people that have seen this, that are calling the state police, call Stan Gordon. So Stan Gordon documents all this stuff. I'll give you a good example. I live in Luzerne County. That's in northeastern Pennsylvania. A friend of mine was driving through the cemetery. My neighbor, he was driving through the cemetery, and as he's exiting, he saw 2 Bigfoot-like creatures. One was black, one was cinnamon. And he explained to me what happened. And so I wanted to hear the story. So I asked him several times just to make sure that he wasn't embellishing or, making things up. And what I asked him, how did they act? How did they react? How did they look at him? He said that they looked at him like they were curious, and then they walked away sort of human-like. And so I was able to call Stan Gordon, and I got permission for Stan to talk to this guy. And then he took the documentation and wrote it in his archives. And then he publishes this stuff. But with Stan Gordon, it's sort of dry academic data, but it's really good if you're researching the thing. And a typical example might be that, say, on October 5th in Huntington County at 6:00 at night, Farmer and Mrs. Brown were going to the barn to feed the cow, and they saw this Bigfoot emerge from an orb. So it's stuff like that Stan Gordon has been able to document. I mean, people, places, and things. I mean, who, what, when, where, and why. So he's been able to give us that. And we're fortunate in Western Pennsylvania to have people like Stan Gordon that are, maintaining these records. So Stan writes books, and he has all this documentation. So, we have a running record of things, weird things, paranormal things that people are saying, especially in Western Pennsylvania. And when I talk about Chestnut Ridge, I want to talk about, the 1965 Kecksburg flying saucer, December, that came down. To this day, we still don't know what that is. The Bigfoot and orbs and Chestnut Ridge, plus a lot of other things that are happening in that area. And, a lot of this got kicked off with George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And,
really?
Yeah. And George Romero from Pittsburgh, wrote this ostensibly about zombies. But my book, Coal Region Hoodoo, starts off with the Night of the Living Dead. And I contend that, and listen to this. I mean, I'm sure that I don't know what your philosophy is on political talk during your podcast, but I contend that Night of the Living Dead was not so much about zombies, but it was about how the United States was falling apart in 1968. We had, General Westmoreland told everybody that every single province in South Vietnam was secure. They had the Tet Offensive. Every single province in South Vietnam got overrun by the VC. So that was that. The North Koreans captured the American ship, the Pueblo. We had Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy assassinated. We have the Easter riots, the Sunday riots. There were at least 100 cities in America that were torched, that were destroyed, because Black Americans were just so distraught and angry and frustrated that their leader, their beloved leader, was assassinated. Just another one. So there was a lot of horrible things happening. The Chicago riots, crazy stuff. But, if you think it's bad in 2026, take a look at what was happening in 1968. Things were bad, but the Republic endured, despite the fact that we were fractured and they were coming after us. And at all ends, we held together and we pulled through that, just as hopefully we're going to pull through what's happening in 2026. And I'll tell you, year after year after year, it gets worse and worse and worse. And I'm talking about the divide gets worse, gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because there's voices that are inflaming the situation, and there's very few voices of moderation that are trying to bring us together. So, that's my political stance. And it makes me, as a Vietnam veteran, it makes me angry. It makes me frustrated that this is what we're living with now. This is what we're enduring. And it's horrible. So anyway, that's it. Night of the Living Dead, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
The only piece of, I shouldn't say this is good news, but the only piece of good news now is I think people are beginning to see it's not left, right anymore. It's everybody versus the elite.
You're right. Yeah.
I think that's the only good news, because like GWAT vets like myself, without getting into the current situation, they try to draft my son. Mm-hmm. We ain't going to be hippies in the streets. Like, it ain't going to work that way this time. Yeah. And there are people on the left who also are just like, this is geopolitical suicide is what we're saying. But anyway, I'll leave it at that.
You're right. But
my audience knows where I stand on this one. So, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's patriotic to take a stand. I think you have to take a stand. And there's a thing called persuasion. Back in the old days, on a Sunday, people would get the soapboxes. They would stand on the soapbox and they would preach. They tried to convert people over to their side. And I think it's our duty, our responsibility as Americans, as patriots, to go and do whatever we can. And even with protest, protest is the least effective form of resistance, but still it lets people know where you stand, whether it's No King's Day or whatever it is. So, whatever. I've attended these No Kings rallies, and there's a lot of older people there as well as younger people. This is different. We didn't see this back in the 60s with the protests. So
yeah, this is definitely different. Like, there's a whole generation of, like, the way that your generation of veterans was treated was unforgivable.
Yeah,
the people who are currently involved in this misadventure, like, they just happened to be in during this time, but heaven forbid they try a draft this time, because
yeah,
there's about 20 million angry veterans out there that they ain't getting the kids.
I wish the brothers would reunite, and I'd love to march again. And I was there. When I got out of NAM, I joined the, this isn't paranormal, but I joined the VVAW, the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. And we went to Washington, D.C., and we protested Nixon's inauguration. We were proud to do that. And so anyway, that's that. But again, everybody walks their own pathway. Everybody has their own journey, and everybody has their own opinion. So but voice it. It's okay to voice it, but just do it in moderation. Have a conversation. And again, the rules are that you don't try to convert each other. You just share your ideas.
Yeah. And Maxim, all I do is I just make predictions. If we do this, this is what's going to happen. And then I'm proven right. And it's like, right? Like, before we even started this, I'm like, this is insanity. Oil prices are going to go through the roof. Look, I hope I'm wrong, in the sense that I hope the president declares victory and just moves on. But I have a feeling the Iranians ain't gonna give up so easily.
But the other thing too, if you leave Iran, much like the Gaza Strip, come on, what do you have there? You don't have industry. You don't have anything. You don't have any water. What is desalination plants? You don't have an infrastructure. You just have a whole lot of poverty and regular people that are suffering, women and children. So that's it. War is hell, and and I don't like the way this is going.
I almost think there's a layer above reality that we don't see, that, because none of it makes sense, independent of like politics and all that. This whole thing doesn't make, it's almost as if there's a feature of the system that is engineering us to depopulate in some way. If you look at all the craziness in the last 10 years, you can explain everything by just saying, okay, my goal is to depopulate the globe. What do I need to do? I'll have a pandemic here.
Yeah.
I'll have psychological sterilizations here. I'll have, I'll start, get some wars cooking. It doesn't matter if they don't make sense, because if they don't make sense, that'll create even more death, because people will resist. So, like, it's just, everything makes sense. I'm not saying that's what it is.
Yeah.
But that fits kind of paranormal.
Yeah, that's
conspiracy level thing.
That's
right?
The dystopian, apocalyptic view. Why not? In 2025, I had 2 books published. One was The Schmurl Haunting, when Ed and Lorraine came to town, and also another one was called Paranormal Apocalypse. Is This How It Ends? And I take a look at the end times, what is known as eschatology, the eschatologists, and they study the end times. And the way it seems to work, from what little I know about it, is that either we have already lived the end times, or we're living it now, or it's around the corner. So take your pick. But how many different ways can the world end? How can we die? And certainly a nuclear winter, World War III could be one. A pandemic could be another. Just a whole lot of different ways. And with global warming, that's been politicized. Global warming, that's another one. And look what just happened in Asheville, North Carolina, in the mountains of North Carolina, just, a couple years ago, when we had floods of biblical proportions. When did that ever happen? Not in North Carolina. Come on. Maybe someplace else. But
it's happening in Hawaii right now.
Yeah, I know.
Actually.
A whole week of rain. Yeah. So I tell, in Paranormal Apocalypse, Is This How It Ends? I start off, and I know we're supposed to talk about Coal Region Hoodoo, but I talk about H.P. Lovecraft's philosophy that the most powerful of emotions is fear. The most elemental of emotions is fear, but the most powerful is fear of the unknown. And we are driven, many people are driven by that fear of the unknown, waiting to see what's right around the corner. And we need to be firm and steady and use rational thought and common sense and not be like lemmings and follow the other ones. Make up your own mind, look at the facts, and then make up your own mind. But, just be smart people. And if anybody that's listening, don't be afraid. Fill your heart with knowledge and wisdom, not with fear. So I think a lot of entities, whether they be political or religious or societal, they use that fear to control us. Because if you're afraid, that's a great way to get it. And how about another one too? You're talking about that insanity. How about chaos? How about if every day there's another chaotic, crazy, like crazy thing happening, like taking over Greenland or whatever, sending troops into Mexico, whatever the craziness is, it makes us nuts. And what we do to keep from going crazy, we internalize, we cocoon, we get back from that stuff. We numb ourselves with either dope or booze or sex or shopping or food or whatever. We numb ourselves. And I think today, because of that fear and that chaos, I think there's a lot of us in our society that are numbing themselves because of what's happening. Listen, this is not normal what's happening. This is
right.
This is crazy, and it is orchestrated. Somebody's pulling the strings and making this happen.
100%.
So,
and by the way, it happens every 80 years. There's a book called Generations. The period is called a seculum, right? And there are 4 generations in every seculum. 80 years ago was roughly the end of World War II,
mm-hmm.
and 80 years before that was roughly the end of the Civil War. Mm-hmm. So we're right on schedule. We're in and there's the 4th generation in that seculum or period is called the 4th turning. And we're in the midst of the 4th turning right now. That's the most destructive phase.
If I'm correct, the writers of Generations was Strauss and Howe.
You're 100% correct.
Yeah,
I can never remember those names. You remembered them for me.
Yeah.
Then there's 2 books. Now I haven't finished I have them myself, and I have to read them, but I kind of
it's good
know
stuff,
enough high level about it.
But it's because I was a baby boomer, and we were empowered. We were idealistic. We had the opportunity to protest and do all of this stuff because our parents and grandparents sacrificed for us. And then after us, Generation X, you had a lot of, the shit hit the fan. You had kids that were latchkey kids raising themselves. You had divorced parents. You had grandparents raising kids. You had Mexican black tar heroin that hit the streets, and especially in the Pacific Northwest with grunge rockers. It was the drug of choice. It's just the way it was. Not with my generation. We did LSD and mescaline and smoked some low-grade 2% pot.
Well, you raised something. I have a friend who grew up during the crack epidemic in Harlem. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And he said, "You remember ice? Remember the drug ice? It like showed up out of nowhere."
Yeah.
And
methamphetamine.
Well, no, it was. I'm not sure exactly what it was. Worse than methamphetamine, but it was around for like a month, and it was like killing people on a mass scale, and it just suddenly just disappeared overnight and just never appeared again. It was almost like it was introduced and somebody's like, it's killing too many. Let's bring it back.
Yeah. Well, fentanyl is doing a pretty good job now. They pepper everything with it. And my career was as a drug and alcohol professional. So I did trainings for the Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs and talked about emerging drug trends. And man, they just keep on coming. But it's worse now than it was back in the day. And fentanyl is the thing that's really changing the equation. Back in the old days, you could go and shoot up heroin and maybe pass out and then wake up the next morning. But with fentanyl, it slows the heart, it stops the breathing, you're dead. So, that's the game changer right there.
Yeah, even police who handle fentanyl victims, get dosed with it sometimes. That's extremely dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just putting a red bow on all this stuff, Sean, I think that with all the crazy stuff that's happening, with all the uncertainty, with all the, the way things are looking, the apocalypse and all that, I think getting into the supernatural and the paranormal is a wonderful therapy, I think, for me, maybe for guys like me and you, just to figure out what it is, to look at the parameters, to see how, high and low it is and all that. And I think that, when people say, well, why are you interested in the paranormal? Well, that's kind of a rhetorical question because it's the same reason everybody else is into it. We're curious, we're curious about what's, around the corner. What's the monster in the closet or under the bed? We want to find that stuff out. So that's why we're looking. That's why we're searching for that. No other reason. And by that curiosity, that childlike curiosity, you can conquer fear through that curiosity. And that's how kids do it. And that's how we do it too. Who was it? J.R.R. Tolkien said that the adult mind has greater need for fantasy than that of the child. And I love horror and sci-fi and everything and the paranormal. I just immerse myself in it, but mainly because of my curiosity. I'm just fascinated about it. And I've always been that way. It's sort of what defines me.
Now I'm going to take you off track a little bit for a second, but it's all related. It's all related.
Sorry.
No, but this is, it's in the right direction, but I don't know if it's Nietzsche that said this, but sometimes when you stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back. Mm-hmm. When you started, or as you've been examining some of this stuff, have you had any personal experiences because there's a difference between belief and knowledge. Knowledge is you've experienced something. Anything like that, like precognition, remote viewing, poltergeist, whatever, cryptids, whatever. Have you had any strange experiences with animals? Like that stuff happens to me constantly. I can explain it. My audience knows all about it. But
yeah, I have two things that have happened that I can recollect. One of which, when I was a kid, I had this recollection of being able to go down in my basement and levitate. I felt that I could fly around the basement. Now, again, what was that? Was that just my childish imagination? Or was there actually something there? It felt real. But I can't prove it, but it's so profound with me today, But the other thing, though, that is even more telling, I was a radarman aboard the USS Constellation during Vietnam, and we saw UFOs. Solid, tangible contacts. And again, by solid, tangible, what we saw on the radar screen, they weren't, you could exclude hallucinations, reflections from Mars or Venus, all drug use, all that stuff. And it wasn't that, it wasn't what we called sea return or garbage. It was solid. And you had ways to manipulate that viewfinder to bring it in a more solid way. But anyway, here's the thing. We would have these logbooks and they would have us write down the UFOs and the range and bearing. And they were numerous. There were many of us, probably all of us saw UFOs. But we were told, and keep in mind, most of us guys in the Navy at the time were under the age of 20. We were like little babies, playing the war games. Under the age of 20, they told us, keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anybody what you saw. And during my off hours, what I would do is I would go there when I was, at the CIC, the Combat Information Center, and all the movies you see, the status boards and all that. And I would look through these logbooks and look at all the UFO sightings, and there were tons of them. So the next day, when I was off ship, there would be brand new logbooks, and they would start all over. So the old logbooks with all the UFO sightings were gone. So
let's step all the way back. Let's say you have a logbook for 30 days, not a single UFO sighting. Every day it would be the same logbook until it was full. But you're saying the moment a logbook in mid-use, if there were a single UFO sighting that somebody recorded, there would be a new logbook the next day.
All I know is that when I did my own investigation, again, I was just curious. I just want to see what was in the logbooks, because I know I saw UFOs. I want to see if anybody else saw them. So all I know is that the next day when I went to look at those logbooks, they were brand new logbooks. The old ones were gone. So we started over again. But the UFO sightings were pretty commonplace. One thing I think of interest, an interest to me, that when we were on duty, in the Gulf of Tonkin, one of the other battleships that we had was the Bonhomme Richard. Bonhomme Richard had Commander Morrison. and that was Jim Morrison of the Doors' father. And during the Israeli-Egypt 6-Day War, the Egyptians took out a ship. It was an American spy ship called the Liberty, and they took it out. About 45, 50 guys died. So there was sort of like a cover-up. There was a hush-hush thing.
Wait, you said the Egyptians, you mean the Israelis, right?
Yeah, the Israelis took out an American ship, thank you, called the Liberty. So Commander Morrison of the Bonhammer Shard said that he should have watched what he had to say because it came back to bite him. But he said that there should be economic and military reprisals against Israel. And you don't say that when you're in the military. You follow the chain of command. So anyway, bad things happened to him. He never climbed that career ladder. But here's something else, too. There was a real interesting conspiracy theory about the death of Jim Morrison, an alcoholic. And Jim Morrison left for the alleged obscenity charges here in Florida. He went to Paris, and he was going to be an American living in exile. So anyway, he would go to this one bar every night and just drink. I mean, he was an alcoholic and a full-fledged hardcore alcoholic. He was found dead of heroin, having used heroin. He wasn't a heroin user. The theory is that the Israeli Mossad, the wrath of God came over there and they have a team and they check it out. They have a safe house. They have the cars. They have the driver. They have the assassins. They found out where he was hanging out, shot him up with the heroin, carried him up to his apartment, put him in a bathtub. And 2 days later, they, I guess, found his body. Or 2 days later, it was revealed that he was dead. Never an autopsy, nothing like that. But, again, some people believe that it was just payback. Now, again, we don't know.
Yeah, to his dad, right?
To his dad, yeah, exactly.
I believe that. Yeah, that's well within something Mossad would do. Yeah.
And then I've been warned to watch what I say. That I shouldn't talk about this. But I mean, when was the last time you saw on the front page or the second page of any paper that say, what is it, March the 22nd is the 30-year anniversary of the sinking of the Liberty by Israel? I mean, we don't hear about that. There's a very convenient cover up or a blackout or whatever.
Is that Is this seriously today? Is that the anniversary seriously today?
Oh, no, I don't know. It happened.
Okay.
Whenever the 6-Day War was, when the United States just sent so much, weaponry to Israel. I mean, and to win that war. But anyway, that's the theory. That's the conspiracy theory. And I don't know if it's true, but, I've been warned about that, just as I've been warned not to get too close to the paranormal, not to dabble too close, not to get too close to the flame. And I don't think I do. I mean, I view this thing as an academic, and by all the things that I've read with exorcists and ghost hunters that go into a haunted house, a haunted location, many of whom are protected either with the prayers, the white light prayers, the prayers of Saint Michael, the archangel, with holy water, crucifixes, salt, whatever that is, whatever the things that they use to have protection there. And I think that with me, I mean, just being, not filling my head with the demon and not dancing with the devil and all that. I mean, I have no interest in making a deal for anything. And, I think that, if you fill your head with God's grace, if you think in positive terms and all that, I think you're going to be okay. But I mean, you need to be educated. You need to arm yourself with knowledge, not fear. And the thing that scares me more than anything else are some of these young people, adolescents, that either dabble with Ouija boards, not realizing that you're opening up possible doorways to the unknown, and you don't know what could be coming in. And then the other thing is that some of these young people that go into these places looking for ghosts or spirits and sometimes finding demons. Not all the times, but sometimes. And then, you just see some of that, and it frightens me because, you're talking about a whole lot of adolescent impulsivity and just, not a whole lot of wisdom, but just a whole lot of testosterone or estrogen, cooking through their veins. So, I mean, for anybody listening to this podcast, if you are a ghost hunter, if you dabble in any of these occult or paranormal things, be knowledgeable of what you do. Maybe talk to some other people that have done this and just get some guidance, because on a bad day, some bad things could happen. So, that's my warning.
Are you familiar with the skull experiments in the UK? SCOLE?
No.
That's where they actually tried to experimentalize a lot of this stuff. I think it was in the early 90s. There was a group of sitters, right? They actually went through, systematically had seances, would see if they had results, and then they would kind of rotate people through until they got the right group. And there's a whole stage of things that happen, right? It starts with poltergeist activity. Then they start to hear disembodied voices. Then they start to have whole conversations. They would ask questions. And before they asked the question, they would get the answer, right? So there was like this precognitive aspect to it.
Uh-huh.
And then at one point, portals started opening. And, they would get film, pictures. So in other words, they would take factory sealed film and just put it in the room. And then they would open up the film and there would be photos and things like that developed. So there's definitely a fun, and then I think it kind of spiraled out of control where there would be entities kind of coming in. There was an entity called Mr. Blue they have on camera.
Wow.
That was kind of like that, looked like kind of a gray but ethereal, like.
Yeah.
So there's allegedly something to it, right? And it's not something that you should dabble with unless you have somebody who is an expert on the problem. Right. And I think the Vatican is probably the most well-versed on what, a lot of this stuff that's going on. And I don't think they're always the entirely straightforward about what things are. So like I'm trying to think of an example, like Fatima, was that really the Virgin Mary, or was that,
mass hallucination?
Well, I don't know. I think it was real, but the thing is it always what it says it is?
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't mean to throw us way off track. So I'd asked you about personal experiences.
Yes.
Going back to Coal Region Hoodoo. Rotate back.
We started like 3 days ago. Yeah. Okay.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
Yeah, so you were continuing along that path. You were talking about Chestnut Ridge. Yeah. By the way, there's a remote view. Are you familiar with the Stargate program that the U.S. military did with remote viewing?
No, I'm familiar with remote viewing, and I know that Jacques Vallée was pretty adept at doing that. My only experience with that, if I may, I was doing a conference, an esoteric conference. I was one of the presenters, and the guy sitting next to me worked for the government in remote viewing. And I wanted to pick his brain and find out what he knew and what he did, but he said he couldn't do it. So
what was his name?
I don't know his name. He was from San Francisco. And my theory about this, a lot of us thought that Montauk.
Really quick, it wasn't Pat Price, was it?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. All right.
I don't know.
Because he died pretty early on. Someone may have killed him. But...
Yeah. No.
All right, anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. Keep going.
Yeah, that's quite all right. But where was I going with this? A lot of us thought that after the Philadelphia experiment, that the government set up this super secret group on Montauk in Long Island. And this is the place where they would go and experiment with time travel and remote viewing and, mind control, just all these, really interesting, exciting paranormal things. I don't think that it's in Montauk, but I think it's scattered all over the place, whether it's in San Francisco with remote viewing or Tulsa for mind control or whatever. But I think that there's entities all over where the government is looking at this, and not just our government, but Russia, China, Iran, probably North Korea, looking to see if we could get any kind of a military edge by doing remote viewing or, astral projection or whatever that might be. So I believe that these are true. I think there's a lot of disinformation and false information about this, but I do think that these entities are out there. I don't think that we're going to find out about them because it's on a need-to-know basis. I don't think the President of the United States is privy to that because he does not have a need-to-know. I'll say that again. He does not have a need to know. And the other thing too is we could probably, if you guys are a lot smarter than me, you could follow the money and see what groups, what black ops groups are being funded, not the FBI and the CIA, but what other groups are being funded. Where's the money going? Here's something that's pretty interesting, Sean. Prior to 9/11, I think it was Rumsfeld, I want to say it was Donald Rumsfeld, but I revealed the fact that there were billions of dollars going to a special military group that were lost. And he wanted to know where that money went.
That was Rumsfeld. The day he did that, the next day was 9/11.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we took our eye off of that prize and we looked at something else that was a lot more dramatic. And so, but I think that, things like that happen on a regular basis. And, and it's a matter of just following where that money is going and what they're doing with it. So, but again, we don't have to need to know. And I'll tell you what, those congressional UFO hearings, July of 2023, I think September of 2024, November of 2025, David Grush, Luis Elizondo, all these people, pilots and people claiming that, like Grush, the example of Grush, that he knows where the bodies are and he knows where the crashed vehicles are. So that was back in 2023. So where are they? Show us your cards. A couple of years ago, I wrote letters. I'm now a Floridian. I'm down here in Florida now, but I wrote letters to all of these individuals that are involved in the congressional UFO hearings. Chuck Schumer was one, Senator Marco Rubio, Anna Paulina Luna, all these people. The only one that wrote back was Marco Rubio. And he sent me this nice 2-page letter. And I was getting ready to ask him can't you find a way to encourage people like David Grush to go and tell us what they know? And right then, Marco Rubio gets promoted to Secretary of State. So there went my contact. But I think that's something that maybe, I don't know. I don't know if we would ever get any information from that. Those congressional hearings are nothing. They showed nothing. There's no transparency. The only thing that these people, these witnesses say is that there's no transparency and the government knows something that they're not telling us about. So we hear that mantra, hear that song and dance all the time, but nothing conclusive. And Grush was also the one saying that in the 1930s, Mussolini captured a UFO that he gave to the Vatican, who gave it to us. So, I've looked at that. I've researched that. I haven't seen anything to prove that's true. And I don't know. I'm just wondering, I think these guys worked in secret government organizations, David Grush as well as Luis Elizondo. But I don't know if they really, I don't know what they know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know what they know. I'm just pretty frustrated at this point because I thought at this point we would know more than what we know now. And we basically...
I don't think we ever will, because I think once you start unraveling that string, the nature of reality is probably far more alarming than what people are capable of understanding. And there have been clues. The other thing about people like Elizondo, he's not a disclosure guy. He's really counterintelligence. Mm-hmm. That was his entire career. You don't pluck somebody out of counterintelligence and say, hey, this is going to be your disclosure guy. You pluck somebody out of counterintelligence and use them to continue doing counterintelligence. Mm-hmm. You pose as the disclosure advocate and have people come out of the woodwork and reveal things, and then they're kind of captured and dealt with. And you're seeing that with Arrow is part of a program that was set up, which is really basically a honeypot for disclosure people within the government. You also saw the disappearances of 2 key scientists, and you also saw the murder of 2 key scientists recently. There's a Caltech scientist that was murdered outside his home, and there was a plasma physicist at MIT that was randomly murdered. Then General McCaslin, who was widely believed to have access to some of these programs, just went out for a hike and has disappeared, never to return. Mm-hmm. So I think what happened is certain things were released with those videos that came out. And what you're seeing is what the intelligence community calls a modified limited hangout, which is you have like a nest, rusted Russian nesting dolls of cover stories. And in each of those cover stories, there's some layer of truth.
Right.
Right.
Oh,
So you just, oh, you got us. And you just show them the first nesting doll.
mm-hmm.
Right. But beneath that, there's probably a dozen. So the other thing too is in recent years, you literally, I mean, in this Iran war that's going on right now, this is the least, which I'm trying to think of the right wording for this. I've never seen so little information about a war in my lifetime coming out in real time, which tells me two things. Number one, it's heavily censored. And number two, it's heavily censored because it's going extremely badly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I extend that to any information I get from government and institutions, right? And even the disclosure thing, it's what they call in professional wrestling kayfabe, right? Where you have the hero and the heel, right? But they're both, they're both just acting, and they're both part of the same team, right? It's like Democrats and Republicans, right? Two wings of the same bird.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're ever going to find out. I think the only way we find out is by taking personal risk to delve into some of these mysteries that you cautioned against, right? You just experiment, right? But you do it, pray to God, like try to retain your faith, and you kind of go that route. Yeah. Anyway, we're a long way from the reason I brought up remote viewing really quick is about Chestnut Ridge.
Yeah.
One of the remote viewers in the Stargate program, Angela Ford, grew up under the shadow of Chestnut Ridge, right nearby. Yeah. So anyway, there's lots of weird stuff. Anyway, we're back to Coal Region Hoodoo, Chestnut Ridge.
Yeah. Yeah. So Coal Region Hoodoo is a lot of information, a lot of stories about northeastern Pennsylvania and also western Pennsylvania with the Chestnut Ridge. Both areas are identified by coal mining. In northeastern Pennsylvania, it was a hard coal, the anthracite, and then soft coal on the other side. So, a lot of coal mining, a lot of superstition, a lot of immigrants that came here to work in the mines. It's interesting. I was doing a presentation at one of the libraries in Luzerne County, and there was a guy there sitting in the back with a legal pad. He's taking all kinds of notes and everything. I'm thinking, man, what can I be saying that's so important that he's writing it down? But here the guy was from Poland, and back years ago, many, many years ago, he said he remembered when he was an older guy, when these mining companies would come to Poland and they would recruit these young guys, these Polish kids, to come to America to work in the mines. They told them that the streets of America were paved in gold. They gave them the hard sell. And, what happened was they basically were indentured servants. And, back in Pennsylvania, there was a point where they couldn't get the kids of the coal miners to go down into the mines. It was too dangerous, too hard. They just stopped doing that. We, also had what was known as breaker boys, little kids, little babies, maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, going down into the mines, doing a lot of dangerous work and getting crippled, maimed, or killed. And what's interesting is that not just in Pennsylvania, but in the United States, there were laws to protect animals before we had laws to protect children. Come on, how did that ever happen? So that was that. But my book talks about that. And I just think that Pennsylvania definitely is one of the, I think, more bizarre paranormal states out there. It's just so diverse, between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and the in-between, the anthracite coal mines and Lancaster and the hex signs and all that. So it's a great state. And, the one thing about Chestnut Ridge that I think is interesting, they shot some of the movie Silence of the Lambs. They shot it in Fayette County, and that was the home of Buffalo Bill. And Buffalo Bill was a psychopath that was kept people in prison, and he was making a uniform out of their human skin.
Yeah. The famous scene.
Yeah.
Like goodbye horses. Yeah, the famous scene.
That was based on a guy, the last person that was executed in Pennsylvania. It was Gary Heidnik. And he was a guy of a high intelligence. He was a minister, and he would entice these women Most of them were black and most of them were just like mentally challenged. But he would get them and put them in dungeons, just dungeons, and do a lot of horrible things. I mean, just like very bizarre, cannibalistic, perverse things. And he was the role model for Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, I remember that name growing up because I grew up in Delaware.
Okay.
I went to school in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. And I hadn't heard that Gary Heidnick's name for decades until you just mentioned it. And it reminded me. And now I got to go look it up. And it's kind of odd. Why isn't that name more well known? Right? Because there are others like Dahmer and stuff like that you hear about, but you never hear about Gary Heidnick.
As infamous as Jeffrey Dahmer, but this guy was a brainiac. I mean, he was making all kinds of money on the stock market. I mean, he's good. And he was a minister. So he combined that religiosity, all that stuff, and just really crazy. But anyway, I don't know. It's like a little known character, but he's in my book, Coal Region Hoodoo. And it's just sort of like a potpourri of a whole lot of supernatural things. It could have easily been 2 books, but, we decided just to make it one, and that's it. So,
was there anything supernatural related to Gary Heidnick at all?
I don't think so. I think it was just that his connection to Silence of the Lambs and Buffalo Bill. I mean, that was, that's how I followed the dots. But it was just that his perversity, his level of perversity. I mean, it was beyond the pale. It's just very sick. He killed the one woman, ground her up, and fed her remains to some of the other prisoners there. Things like that. I mean, just like very cruel, very bizarre. I mean, to call him paranormal would be too kind. That would be a compliment. So, no, he's not paranormal in any way.
Where does the hoodoo part come in?
Yeah. I think to be a successful author, you got to be a successful promoter. And when I was putting together Coal Region Hoodoo, you have to come up with a book with a name that's going to resonate. And down in Louisiana and Mississippi, they have the voodoo. They have hoodoo, which is a variation of that. And hoodoo could be either a blessing or a curse. So I usurped that term. I took it, ripped it off, if you will, and used it for the coal region. But that has just like resonated big time. And I mean, I'm glad I did that. I mean, just it's a proper way to define what's happened out here. I'll give you one example with my one book, actually the book that got me into the paranormal, which is Sheppton, The Myth, Miracle, and Music.
Mm-hmm.
3 guys were trapped down there in the mine and only 2 came out. But that was part of that hoodoo. They came out after 2 weeks. It was a story of human survival. And there was celebration. It was all wonderful. But then came the hoodoo. The neighbors wanted to know, what happened to your buddy? What happened to the other coal miner that was down there with you? And they didn't know, but the townspeople conjectured then, back in 1963, as well as today, that maybe the possibility of cannibalism was in play. And even Louis Bova, the missing coal miner, the coal miner that allegedly was cannibalized, even today, his son Johnny believes that that's a possibility, that daddy could have been eaten by the other 2 guys. So whenever he's interviewed, he tends to say that. So it's just, I don't believe it happened. I think that there was a cave-in, there was mountains of rock and timber and coal that separated Felon and Throne from Bova, and there was never any chance of them doing any of that. Besides, when you're down in the mine for so long, you're traumatized, you're adrenalized, you're not so much thinking of food. You might be thinking about water, but I mean, you're just thinking of how to survive in temperatures that are in the 50s, a constant 50s. I mean, it's bone numbing. I mean, hypothermia and everything else. It's horrible. And I think the worst thing for these guys was the possibility, the suggestion that they would never be rescued. And especially with the older guy, Felon, Davy Felon, who had been a coal miner since he was a kid. I mean, he knew his way around the coal mines, but he knew that at 330 feet under the ground, he knew exactly pretty much how long it would take for them to come down and get him out of there. And it was taking far too much time. So that was the Sheppton story. But Sheppton, which had stories of the paranormal, of out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences and after-death experiences, was the book that opened up the doorways to the paranormal for me. And just happenstance, just a crazy luck of the draw. I wasn't looking for the paranormal, but it found me. So that was, like I said, 2015 when that came out. And, I've just found a niche. I found a genre in the paranormal. And I found a readership, a demographic that actually liked my stuff. So, how rewarding is that to be, acknowledged in the paranormal community? Because I was just sort of back in the day, 10 years ago, I was just new at this. So, this was pretty cool. That,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories about Shamokin? Anything in particular? I'd have to throw that out there.
Well, that whole area is the Coal region. And I've gone to Shamokin, numerous times there. And there's a big mountain of slag there. If I was a lot younger and had a camera, I'd go there and just shoot horror movies because it's the perfect location. But no, right around Shamokin is Sheppton, which is the basis of my first book. Centralia, which was the cursed town. An Irish Catholic priest put a curse on it. The Molly Maguires beat him up. He was speaking out against the Molly Maguires, and they beat him up, and he put a curse on the town of Centralia. He said, at the end of the day, the only thing left standing will be St. Ignatius Church. And even that burned down. It started in around 1962. Actually, it took around the same time as Sheppton. They were having a festival, and they decided to burn the rubbish in this one coal pit. And it caught fire. And that anthracite burns long and hard. And to this day, that just started around 1962. The Centralia fire is still burning today. They have tried to put it out. They've doused it with water, with cement, with, clay, whatever they used, dirt. They have not been able to put it out, and it keeps on moving around. And there's just all kinds of, probably millions of acres of anthracite that is slowly burning. They call it the devil's fire, but, I believe there was a curse placed on this town. And that's right in our backyard, all these things. So that was close to Shamokin. And did you have a paranormal connection to Shamokin?
No, I know someone who lives in Shamokin.
Yeah.
And there are certain places where you can't go to the park because if you go off path, you might fall into a mine.
Somewhere. Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's really dangerous.
Yeah.
There's like a feeling of it being haunted.
Okay.
Because of so many deaths in the coal region.
Yeah. Well, who knows? There's, Jimmy Hoffa could be there, one of the pits. Who knows? One of the mines.
Now, what about, you mentioned hexes and white witches in Lancaster. I'm assuming that's connected somehow with the Pennsylvania Dutch, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it is. Like I said, I wrote Coal Region Hoodoo because there were so many books that were written about Lancaster and white witches and hex signs and all that. And it came over from the superstition of people from Europe, mainly Germany, Pennsylvania Dutch. And they had a thing called powwow. And powwow was a way to go and actually heal people through herbal medicine. It's passed down from, I believe, from male to female, female to male, something like that. But
it's like hexmeisters or something, like a hexmeister is the male version.
So they could heal you as well as put a curse on you. In Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit, I have a chapter there on Dr. Frederick Santee. He was a white witch. He was the high priest for the Coven of the Kata. His coven was initiated by Sybil Leek, the world's most famous witch. And when she came to Walpole in Pennsylvania, which was 5 miles from where I lived, and I knew Dr. Santee, I was friends with him, but she came there with her son Julian and with her publicist. And she initiated his coven. But Santee was a genius. He was a child prodigy. He was the youngest person to graduate from Harvard. Bertram Russell, the agnostic and mathematician, wanted Santee to participate in his experimental school in the UK. And Santee was young at the time, but he turned it down because he didn't think that Bertram Russell had used enough discipline for his students. So he didn't do that. But Bertram Russell said that Santee was one of the most foremost thinkers of the 20th century. So he was just like a genius. But Santee told me a couple of things. He said that the power that you have with witchcraft could be used for either good or for bad. If you used the right pathway, the right hand, you could do the healing and helping people. But if you use the left pathway, you could go and do hexes and put spells on people. He said that whatever you do, there's karma involved and it'll come back on you. He said tenfold, everything I've read talks about coming back threefold. But he talked about that. And then I had interviewed him numerous times. And then Santee also said this. He said, there's no difference between the supernatural and the scientific. He says it's all part of the same thing. And I think a good example of that might be, a ball falling. You see the ball falling, so there's the scientific cause and effect. The effect is the ball drops and you see it. And the cause, we know, it's not witches or demons. We know it's Newton's law of gravity. But when you see orbs and cryptids and miracles and shapeshifters and all that, we say it's the supernatural only because we don't know if there might be a scientific law that connects us to that anomaly, that phenomenon. So a lot of us in the field are quick to say this is of the paranormal when it may be something else. And, good examples might be weather inversion. I mean, clouds that look like flying saucers. I mean, damn, they look like flying saucers. They're clear. They're raised.
Lenticular clouds.
Yeah. Or orbs that go through plate glass windows, or just all kinds of things like that. I mean, that probably meteorologists know about, but us lay people don't. So, but Santee he's in my book. And then, in 2025, a bunch of us got together and Oculus Alchemy, the documentary of people from New York City, they came and we did a documentary on Dr. Frederick Santee that can be viewed on YouTube. So it's Oculus Alchemy, Dr. Frederick Santee, White Witch, and that's on YouTube. And, it's about, maybe 40 minutes, but it was kind of nice to just give this guy his due, just give him his moment of celebrity.
Is he still around?
No, he died, I think it was around 1980, I believe, somewhere around there. Okay. I went to his funeral. I hung out with his publicist who was drinking, I forget the guy's name, a Southern guy, thick bourbon voice, but he was drinking vodka and milk. And David McCullum, that was his name, and Crown Publishing. But Santee had a Protestant burial. So he was a Christian. He was a Wiccan. Most Wiccans don't believe in the devil, but he did. He told me about, how their coven works, that they believe that getting people together, 12, at least maybe 12 or fewer, you can put together innate powers to help people. Like if somebody has cancer, to help them. And it reminds me of a Christian prayer circle, prayer group where, you call one another and say that, local Mildred is suffering from, some disease. Let's pray for her. And so you have all these people collectively putting their energies into this one person. So, I think it's a similar thing. And I mean, it tells us that just maybe human beings have innate powers of helping and of healing. But, it's probably buried behind so many layers and white noise of, the 21st century, commercials and the 9 to 5 and everything else. I mean, it's just difficult, if not impossible, to learn how to go and connect with those powers because we're just busy doing something else. I mean, I think we could, but I think it would probably take a lifetime of meditation and prayer, to try to go and reach those ends. I think it would be difficult for most of us.
Any final words for the audience?
Yeah, I guess my apologies for being all over the place, but if you're interested in the paranormal, please give Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit a chance. It's a wonderful book. It's really one of my bestsellers, published by Beyond the Fray in San Diego. And also, if any of your readers happen to get any of my books, please consider putting a review on Amazon. That's really the gold standard for us writers, us authors. And if anybody wants to check me out, I have a website. It's www.maximfurek.com. So thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you again, Maxim, and all that information will be below in the description. So
Okay,
thank
very
you
good.
again.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.